Trying to figure out how to get to Moraine Lake and wondering whether you should book Parks Canada, Rome Transit, a commercial shuttle, a sunrise shuttle, or a guided tour? In this episode, I'm going to help you stop comparing every single shuttle option and start choosing the one that actually fits your trip. We'll talk about who each option is best for, what to watch out for, and how to think about Lake Louise and Moraine Lake together, and why the cheapest option is not always the best option for your day. Welcome back to the Banff Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Salim Brewer, a local Canmore resident living the mountain life all year long. I help travelers like you plan unforgettable trips to Banff, Lake Louise, Moraine Lake, Jasper, and the Canadian Rockies. Today we're talking about one of the most confusing parts of planning a Banff trip, how to get to Moraine Lake. I covered shuttles in episode 3, but I felt this topic needed a refresh and needed to be brought back up to the top. I completely understand why people find this stressful. Moraine Lake is probably one of the places you most want to see on your Banff trip. It's that classic turquoise lake surrounded by the Valley of the Ten Peaks. It's beautiful, it's iconic, and for a lot of people, it's right at the top of their must-see list. But you can't just drive there in your own vehicle anymore, not even if you have an accessible parking tag. Only people who are staying at Moraine Lake Lodge can drive there. So now you have to choose between Parks Canada shuttles, Rome Transit, a commercial shuttle operator, some with sunrise shuttles, or even a guided tour. There's Lake Louise-based options, there's Canmore departures, there's Banff departures, and sometimes it feels like every option has its own rules, which isn't a feeling, it's true. It's not just you. It's all very confusing. So in this episode, I want to try to simplify this for you. I'm not going to read you a giant list of every single shuttle company and every single departure time. That information changes, and you'll always want to double check the details before you book. Instead, I want to help you think through which type of transportation fits the kind of Moraine Lake day you actually want. Because that's the part I see people miss all the time. They start by asking, which shuttle should I book? Or they just book the Parks Canada shuttle and then realize that there's no way to get to Lake Louise Ski Resort by public transit and they haven't rented a car. So, that being said, the better question is, what kind of day do I want at Moraine Lake and Lake Louise? Are you trying to do both lakes in one day? Are you hiking? Are you hoping for sunrise? Are you staying in Banff? Are you staying in Canmore? Do you have kids? Do you want the lowest cost option? Or are you willing to pay more to make the day easier and not have any lineups to worry about? Those answers matter. Now make sure you listen to episode 68 where I go into detail on what there is to do at each lake. You may even want to pause this and go listen to that one right now. The first thing I want you to do is stop comparing shuttle companies for a minute. I know that sounds backwards, but this is where most people get overwhelmed. They open up 10 tabs, they look at Parks Canada, Rome, private shuttle operators, different tours, sunrise options, and then everything's just going to start to blur together. Instead, let's start with your day. For example, if this is your first trip to Banff and you just want to see Moraine Lake and Lake Louise, walk around, take those photos, maybe do the rock pile trail at Moraine Lake and the Lake Louise Lakeshore Trail, then you need a very different plan than someone who wants to hike Larch Valley and Sentinel Pass. If you're planning a big hike from Moraine Lake, your main priority is time at the lake and an early enough departure. If you're planning both lakes with kids, your main priority might be avoiding long waits, too many transfers, or a schedule that leaves everyone hungry and tired. You may also want to think about car seats if your kids are still in car seats. If you're staying in Banff without a car, then Rome Transit might make a lot more sense for you than Parks Canada shuttles. If you're staying in Canmore and don't want to drive to Lake Louise, then a Canmore shuttle pickup could be the easiest option. And if sunrise at Moraine Lake is what you really want to see, then you need to be realistic about whether you're using the Parks Canada Alpine Start, a commercial sunrise shuttle, or a guided sunrise option, and which one will give you the best amount of time at the lake. So before you book anything, I want you to ask yourself, do I want to visit Moraine Lake only, or do I want to visit Moraine Lake and Lake Louise? Next, I want you to ask, do I want a scenic visit, or do I want time to hike? Follow that up with, do I care about sunrise, or do I just want a beautiful visit? Next is, price a big factor for you? Are you looking for the cheapest option or the easiest option? And then finally, you need to know, are you okay with transfers, shuttle lineups, or do you want something more direct? Once you know that, the options become so much easier to understand. Let's start with Parks Canada shuttles, because this is usually the most affordable option and the one that most visitors try to get first. The Parks Canada shuttle system is a great option for a lot of people. It really is, especially if you're on a budget and you want to visit both Lake Louise and Moraine Lake on the same day. For the regular Parks Canada shuttles, you start at the Lake Louise Park and Ride at the Lake Louise Ski Resort. That's important. You do not start at the Lake Louise Lakeshore unless you are booked on the Alpine Start shuttle. This is one of the things that confuses people. If you book a regular Parks Canada shuttle, you need to check in at the Park and Ride during your departure window. So you're going to book a 1 hour window and you have to arrive there and check in that 1 hour block. From there, you take the shuttle to either Moraine Lake or Lake Louise, depending on which one you booked. Then once you're in the lake area, you can use the Lake Connector shuttle to go between Lake Louise and Moraine Lake. This is why Parks Canada can be such a good option if you want to see both lakes. You're not booking two totally separate shuttle systems. You're using the main shuttle and then the Lake Connector between the lakes. But there's a few things that you need to know. First, you need to book ahead. Don't assume you'll be able to just show up and get on, because it does sell out. For Parks Canada, the first release of 40% of the tickets is in mid-April. Since we're past that, the remaining 60% are released on a 48-hour rolling basis, meaning if you don't already have these shuttle tickets, you'll be hopping online at 8 a.m. Mountain Time 2 days before you want to visit the lakes. Now, if you get on there at 8 a.m. and find that everything is gone already, check throughout the day, refresh that. Sometimes people get them at 9 a.m., 10 a.m. Sometimes people put a bunch in their cart and then they get released when they don't buy them. So you do want to check again. Second, you need to plan around shuttle times and lines. This is a very popular shuttle system, going to two of the busiest places in Banff National Park. Third, the cheapest option is not always the most relaxing option. It might be perfect for your day, but you need to know what you're getting. There will be lineups to take the Lake Connector between the lakes, and you might need to wait for 1 or 2 shuttles before you get on. If you're an easygoing traveler, you're on a budget, you're happy to work around that, it's still a great choice. Fourth, and I mentioned this already, if you don't have a car, I would consider other options. The Lake Louise Ski Resort does not have any public transportation to get you there from Banff. The Lake Louise Ski Resort does do a free shuttle from the Lake Louise Village to the ski resort, so that really only matters if you're staying in Lake Louise. I've already seen several people having to walk that 3+ kilometers between the village and the ski resort. So you do need to think about how you're going to get there. Now, if you're trying to do a big hike, you want to avoid waiting around, you want to visit at sunrise, or you want to create a very specific Lake Louise and Moraine Lake day, then you may want to look at other options. Now let's talk briefly about Alpine Start. So this is the Parks Canada option that gives earlier access and starts from the Lake Louise Lakeshore instead of that regular park and ride. This can be a good fit for hikers or people who want that earlier start at Moraine Lake. But Alpine Start is also very limited and very popular. There are only 2 times, 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. You'll also need to pay the $42 to park at the Lake Louise Lakeshore. But that's for the day, so you can leave your car there if you want to explore Lake Louise after your sunrise at Moraine Lake, and you'll just use the Lake Connector shuttle to return to Lake Louise. Now, similarly, more Alpine Start shuttles are released throughout the season, like the regular Parks Canada shuttles, if you happen to miss out on that early release. Now, if you don't get these, that doesn't mean your Moraine Lake visit is ruined. You can still use a regular Parks Canada shuttle. You can look at a commercial sunrise shuttle. You can rethink whether sunrise is actually essential, or you can choose a later visit and still have an incredible experience. And this is something I actually say a lot. Sunrise at Moraine Lake can be absolutely beautiful, but it is not the only way to have a great Moraine Lake day. You could get up there and it can also be very cold, it can be cloudy, it can be smoky, or that very early start just leaves everyone exhausted for the rest of the day. So before you chase sunrise, make sure it's actually what you want, not just something you feel like you're supposed to do because you saw it online. Finally, always double check the sunrise time. A 7 a.m. sunrise with a 4 a.m. shuttle is not a good use of your time. I'd opt for a commercial shuttle instead of getting up at 3 a.m. to get me there closer at sunrise time instead of sitting in the dark for 2 hours. Let's move on to Rome Transit. Rome Transit is especially helpful if you're staying in Banff without a car, or honestly, even if you do have a car. But there's a really important distinction here. If you want to visit both Lake Louise and Moraine Lake using Rome, you need to understand the Rome Reservable Superpass. It's not the same as just taking a regular Rome Route 8X and assuming you can hop over to Moraine Lake. You need the Reservable Superpass to visit both lakes. So with that Reservable Superpass, you reserve Rome Route 8X from Banff to Lake Louise Lakeshore. So you pick the time that you go. Then you get access to Parks Canada Lake Connector to Moraine Lake. So that means you travel from Banff to Lake Louise, and then when you're ready, you connect over to Moraine Lake by getting in line for the Parks Canada Lake Connector. Once you're done at Moraine Lake, you're going to come back to Lake Louise, again using that Parks Canada Lake Connector, and return to Banff on Rome Route 8X at your reserved time. Now, for the right traveler, this is a really great option. If you're staying in Banff, don't have a rental car, you want to avoid driving and parking altogether, or looking for something a little bit cheaper, Rome makes a lot of sense. But it does require you to pay attention to timing. You need to know your reserve times, where you're boarding, and how you'll get back. It's also important to know that Rome Transit options, which are around $30 per adult this year, will sell out. In 2026, they release tickets based on the month. So up until August has already been released. If you're traveling in September or October, then you still have an opportunity to grab those if you're listening to this before July 27th. You can obviously go check to see if there's any still available. In my experience, they tend to go quickly, and then, you may find some departure times to Lake Louise, but you might not find any return times, meaning you can't book it because you have to book both of those. So it's always worth taking a look, but just know that if you're traveling here this summer, there's a good chance they're already gone. Now, finally, if you do want to use Rome Transit Route 8X to just see Lake Louise, they do leave space for walk-ups. So if you don't need access to Moraine Lake, or you have that figured out on a different day, you can just go get in line for Rome Route 8X to Lake Louise. Now that line can get long, but it is an option. And if I were going to use that option, I would get up early and try to catch some of the first buses out. All right, next up, commercial shuttle operators. This is where a lot of people get stuck because obviously those commercial shuttle operators cost a lot more than Parks Canada and Rome. But sometimes paying more gives you a much better day. The commercial shuttle operators can be a great fit if you want sunrise, if you're staying in Canmore and you want a direct pickup, or if you just want more flexibility and you can't get Parks Canada or Rome Transit. Now, this is where I want to mention my Banff discounts page because I do have discounts for several of my favorite shuttle and tour options. So before you book, check the discounts page on Travel Banff Canada because you may be able to save on some of those Moraine Lake shuttle options. I'll leave a link in the show notes. Now, for example, if you prefer to be picked up in Canmore, Canmore Travel or Via Moraine can be a really, really great option. And with my discount code from my Banff discount page, you can get 15% off with Via Moraine. Now, as an example, with Via Moraine, you get 2 hours at Moraine Lake, and then depending on the departure time you choose, you can extend your time at Lake Louise past the 2 hours to allow for hiking. Some departure times allow you to spend several hours at Lake Louise, which can work well if you want to hike, do the Lakeshore Trail, or just not feel rushed. If you'd prefer to drive yourself closer to Lake Louise, which is a good idea if you want to do other things in the area, then you can take a shuttle from there. And some of my favorite options are the Moraine Lake Big Bus is one option, and I have a 10% discount code for that one as well. This one works well if you want to visit Moraine Lake, and then you can walk from Deer Lodge, where you park for the shuttle, to Lake Louise for a hike or lake visit. Just make sure you confirm the parking details when you book, especially if you're planning to leave your car there while you spend time at Lake Louise. Moraine Lake Bus Company is one of my all-time favorite options. They do a sunrise shuttle from Samson Mall or regular daytime shuttles where you park at the Lake Louise Ski Resort. You can book your time to and from Moraine Lake and a separate time to and from Lake Louise. Now, this can be really helpful if you want more control over how much time you spend at each lake, or even if you want to return to the ski resort for a proper lunch in between. Fairview Limo is another really great Lake Louise-based option. You park at the Lake Louise Inn, you choose your time to go to Moraine Lake, choose when you want to connect directly over to Lake Louise, and then choose your return time. That flexibility can be really useful if you want to design the day around your own pace, which hikes you want to do. And the other great thing about Fairview Limo is they are the only ones that allow dogs bigger than a lap dog onto the shuttle. So the big thing with commercial shuttles is that you need to read the details. Where do they leave from? How much time do you get at Moraine Lake? Do they include Lake Louise? Can you extend your time if you want? Are they good for hikers or are they better for sightseeing? Do they provide car seats or do you need to bring your own? And where exactly are you parking or being picked up? Not all shuttles are the same, so don't just book the first one with availability. Book the one that matches the day you actually want. Guided tours are another option, and these are best for people who want the easiest planning experience. If you don't want to think about every connection, every parking lot, every timing decision, a guided tour could be a really good fit. This is especially true if you have only one day, you're nervous about getting the logistics wrong, or you want someone else to just handle the schedule. The downside is you may have less flexibility, so you'll usually be following the tour's schedule, and you might not have as much time as you'd like at each stop. So guided tours are best if you want the convenience and to learn from a guide, not if you're hoping for a long independent hike or a slow, flexible day. I also have a discount code for Rad Ventures, who offer some incredible guided tours around Banff. Now, what would I choose in different situations? If you're on a budget and want to visit both Lake Louise and Moraine Lake, I'd look at Parks Canada first. If you're staying in Banff without a car, I'd look at Roam Reservable Superpass. If you're staying in Canmore or Banff and want to avoid driving to Lake Louise or that Roam Reservable Superpass didn't work out, I'd look at a Canmore-based commercial shuttle like Via Moraine or Canmore Travel. If you're staying in Lake Louise area or you're happy to drive to that area, I'd compare Moraine Lake Big Bus, Moraine Lake Bus Company, and Fairview Limo based on how much time you want at each lake. If you're traveling with kids, I'd think carefully about how much waiting, transferring, and standing around everyone can handle. Sometimes the more expensive option is worth it to just make that day go smoother. And then if sunrise is a must-do for you, then yes, look at Parks Canada Alpine Start or one of the commercial sunrise options. But if you don't get sunrise, please don't feel like your day is ruined. Moraine Lake is absolutely stunning later in the day. Now, before we wrap up, here are the top 3 takeaways for those of you that asked for them. Number 1, choose the day first, then choose the shuttle. Don't start by comparing every operator. Start by deciding whether you want a sunrise, a hike, both lakes, a quick visit, or the easiest possible logistics. Number 2, Parks Canada is usually the best budget option, but it's not always the best fit for every traveler. It can be excellent if you want both lakes and you're okay waiting in line for the lake connector or return shuttle, but commercial shuttle operators may work better if you want more control on your timing, no lineups, or you want a pickup in Canmore or Banff. Number 3, don't forget to check my Banff discounts page before you book. I have discounts for several shuttle and tour options, and if you're already paying for commercial shuttle, you might as well save where you can. If you're still trying to figure out how Moraine Lake, Lake Louise fit into your itinerary with Yoho, Banff, Jasper, and the rest of your trip, that's exactly what you'll get help with in my Banff and Jasper Planning Hub. Inside the hub, I have so many options for itineraries that pull all of this together. I also have planning resources like my Moraine and Lake Louise Shuttles workshop if you want to further understand your options. Plus, I do a live Q&A every couple of weeks where you can get your specific questions answered. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Banff Travel Podcast. If you found this helpful, make sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss the next episode. And I always appreciate when you leave a review. Until next time, happy trip planning, and I'll see you out on the trails.